So, ayun, I press record. So, kita ba?
Yes,
Ayun.
Doc.
Okay. So, for this, um, tawag ito, presentation, for this lecture, um, cash course lang naman siya. Probably will end. Alas 6 dyan sa inyo, no? Hello? What time is it there? Alas 6, di ba?
6:14, Doc.
Alas 5 pa lang manggundiri. So, maybe we'll end at around 8. Depende na lang. We have a lot of questions. But, yeah, around, I think it was 120 plus slides, but hindi naman tayo mag-go very deep into everything, but at least we'll try to, at least maintindihan niyo yung mga concepts, kung ano naman yun siya. Since hindi pa naman siya, yung public health, hindi pa naman siya a different subject sa inyong pag-exam yung September. So, yeah, very crash course lang. So, just, makita ba ninyo na? Naka-block. Anyways, makita ba ninyo?
Claro, Doc.
This was the proposal ginawa namin, kaming lahat ng mga nagtuturo ng veterinary public health. Kasi na nga, there is a new plan na magiging 10 yung board exam. This is the subject. At plus, yung 8 na traditional with the addition of vet public health and veterinary surgery. According to Ma'am Beth, sa inyong exam this September or October, later this year, 8 pa naman daw, so no need to worry yet. But the next exam will be 9. Then, pagpasok ng mga K to 12 graduates, ayun na magiging 10. Yun daw yung plan. So, let's take a look at the topics. I do not know if i-highlight ito sa microbiome sa inyo na exam, but most probably some questions would come from here. But anyways, hindi tayo sa vet epidem. So, again, epidemiology, alam niyo naman yung definition nito. Basically, it's a difference, the study of the occurrence and distribution of health or disease health phenomenon within a given population. So with regards to veterinary epidemiology, ito lahat ang magiging topic. If you are a student, magiging student kayo ulit ng vet epidem. Ito lang lahat, dito lang iikot ang vet epidem. We'll try to, in this lecture, we will try to do it, kung pahapyawan na to ba? Pahapyawan na to, tanan. But, yeah, not too deep. But just to start, you basically have two premise, or meron tayong dalawang, not hypothesis, but meron tayong dalawang pinanghahawakan sa epidemiology. So first, alam niyo naman yung epidemiological triangle. You have your agent, the host, and the environment, and the factors between the three. Sometimes, or most of the time, determines the disease. So first, disease or health product phenomenon, the result of a complex interaction between the epidemiological triad. So I know you know this. Number two, ang sakit or at least ang health phenomenon or something wrong with the production sa animal boundary, for example, it doesn't happen randomly. There's always a pattern and there's always a reason. So, sa epidemiology, sometimes, ang tinitingnan lang natin, bakit, ano, or trying to answer those questions with regard to occurrence and distribution of disease. So, yeah, there's always a pattern. So, kita nito, and this was a figure, I think, 2022 figure ng COVID. So, we will try to know later on, bakit ganyan yung itsura niya? What does that mean? So, we'll try to at least, um, look into that later on. So, again, epidemiology sa science, basically, where we try to answer the 4 W's and 1H, or 5 W's and the 1H. So, yeah. The descriptive analytical, if someone is going to ask you descriptive analytical, of course, as the name implies, descriptive, nagde-describe lang yun siya. Ano, sino, or anong animal yung, tawag ito? Sino or anong animal yung may sakit? Ano yung sakit? Kailan nangyari? Saan nangyari? At gaano kadami? Analytical, why? Bakit nagkasakit? At paano nagkasakit? trying to analyze why, how. So yeah, epidemiology is all of those steps if you want to study. So now, the first concept I'd like to reintroduce, alam ko naman alam niyo na ito, introduce to you is the individual place and time, or in veterinary we call it APT, or the animal time and place. So there are factors na, aside from the epidemiological triad na pinag-usapan natin earlier, there are factors that are innate sa individual, sa animal, factors that are related to the environment, the spatial or geospatial, and factors with regard to time, so seasonal things, and etc. Now, would be part of the occurrence of the disease. So individuals, with regard to it, um, ang dami natin pwedeng i-consider with regards to, if we start to talk about veterinary epidemiology. You have your individual animal, paano ba sila gina-manage, the farm, village, location, district, region, etc. So a lot of these determinants. So determinants meaning yung characteristics ng animal. So if we talk about the animal, there is intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic being, yun talaga sila. That's natural. That's how it's going to happen. So for example, FMD, more common or mas malala or mas nakakahawa siya sa cattle compared to other animals. And of course, you will not expect dystocia sa male. So that's an intrinsic determinant. Hindi naman nabubutis yung male. So natural intrinsic, when we say about intrinsic determinants, that's the natural, that's the way things are. Extrinsic factors, there are factors that are external to the individual. So for example, yung disease, Mycobacterium MAP, right? Mycobacterium avium tuberculosis, they are more common on dairy cows because dairy cows are, yung life nila sa production is longer. Take note, di ba, the incubation period of MAP is, I think, long, if I can remember correctly, quite long, when compared to beef cattle na in slaughter mo sila first. Or, when you have AI, siyempre, it's gonna spread much faster if the rearing is intensive. So, kumpul-kumpul yung mga animal. So, ang pagpasal, mabilis lang siya. Or, the farm has low biosecurity, then, tawag ito, then, mas madali siyang makuha at saka mapasa sa ibang farm. So, are we good? Hello? Okay ba? Ang masyadong mabilis or what? So, next we have your times. Tapos na tayo sa animal. So, ATT, time. So, ito na yung mga very common terms that you may have heard, mga demics na you might have heard, especially during ngayong COVID-19. You have your endemic, epidemic, pandemic, and sporadic. I know, alam niyo na, at least you have an idea of what's the meaning of this. So, that is how we describe disease occurrence in time. So, when we say endemic or exotic, yung exotic, endemic lang siya, pero exotic sa term specific for animal population. So, pag sinabing exotic, meaning yan endemic lang. So, endemic, basically, is rare. So, pag sinabi natin endemic sa kabakan, nandun talaga sa kabakan. The prevalence may be like mag-fluctuate ang prevalence, but there. So, I hope you understand that. Epidemic, ang epidemic or epizootic is of course, biglang taas yung, in essence, what that means is biglang taas yung number. So, a disease that is endemic may become epidemic if the number or the prevalence, for example, is biglang tumaas over a short period of time. So, basically higher than what expected. Pandemic, COVID-19, basically a global epidemic. Last but not least. Sporadic naman, the difference between sporadic and epidemic kasi sporadic, wala talaga siya doon. Or it is an accumulation of single cases or cluster of cases wherein bigla-bigla lang siya nag-aaral. And supposedly wala naman talaga siya doon. So some sporadic cases of anthrax occurs Wilson sometimes. Yeah. So I hope you can differentiate between the four because that is how we describe disease phenomenon in humans and in animals in epidemiology. So usually what we do is we plot an epidemic curve. So the vertical or the y-axis, right, is corresponds to the number of cases. Then the x-axis, the time component. So days, weeks, whatever. So this was, for example, yung example sa COVID-19 kanina. If you plot it out, this is the number of cases here. Then this is the time point or the time frame. Here, makikita natin na it's very wavy or wave-like pattern of COVID-19 sa Pilipinas. So what does that mean? So sometimes when we talk about epidemics, there are two types of epidemics. You have your point source and your propagated or propagating epidemic. The point source, an example of that is this one, meaning point source, meaning may isang source lang ng exposure. So for example, kung kanadto mo birthday, niya, nay contaminated nga food. So almost all of those who attended nagka-diarrhea and so on. So if you plot yung epidemic curve ng incident na yun, it's gonna look like this. Because almost all of the people who got sick, presumably, na-expose sila somewhere here. So as time goes by, for example, the incubation period, based on the incubation period, dito dadami yung cases. So upon first epidemic, you can clearly see that there's a point first epidemic if biglang taas, then bigla lang din baba. So meaning, the exposure is somewhere here. Compare it to something like this, tulad ng COVID-19 kanina. Para siyang wave. So this is an example of a propagating epidemic or a propagating epidemic, meaning pasa-pasa na siya. It's not these cases did not acquire the disease or became exposed on a single event or in a single point in time. Meaning people these people probably got the same exposure, but these people got their exposure from these people. So pasa-pasa na siya. So we will have a diagram of this when we go back later on sa disease sa control of or outbreak investigation. We'll look at this. But point is, there's point source at saka propagated epidemic. Point source, isang source lang. Kaya siya point source. One point in time. And you also have propagating, sa na siya. Ito na yun lang na siya. Remember the thing. So spatial patterns here, you just need to consider naman lang sometimes climate affects the occurrence of disease. This is quite obvious sa mga vector-borne diseases. So sometimes dengue is higher. In the Philippines, dengue is quite high between the time na patapos na yung patapos na yung summer at saka pa-start yung rainy season or patapos na yung rainy season at saka pa-start ang summer season. So climate has something to do with it. Sometimes practices also is spatial. You can use basically the point here is merong characteristics ng mga environments that would influence whether disease will occur or not, or disease will spread or not. So, ASF is the So, here, I think it's part, kahit andito na, ito mga definitional things na ito are in yung doon sa handout. So, I would hope that you will be able to go through each of them. Kasi baka lang naman, yung mga definition ng mga ganito, ang lalabas sa board exam. Kasi sometimes, even kahit sa medicine, mga definition ng what is a convalescent carrier, what is the incubatory carrier, lang tayong sumalabas siya. So, yeah. So, yeah. Incubatory carrier, nagkakalat incubation pa lang, nagkakalat siya. Convalescent, pagaling siya, doon pa siya nagkalat. So, basically sa difference between the two. Then, please do remember this one. Kasi nung board namin lumabas ito, yeah, lumabas siya na paano ba yung tamang progression ng disease? Parang pina-pattern out sa question, multiple choice siya, but ano yung tamang sequence ng disease? Sometimes, it pays na you know the basics. Then dito naman, how it's transmitted, you know horizontal already. Pag horizontal, meaning pasa-pasa, most probably vertical, pasa sa mother to mother, father, or mother, parent to offspring. In airborne transmission, just basically remember this one. Ang dami nating earlier during the discussion ng COVID earlier, we were thinking na hindi siya airborne. Right? Kaya nga 1 meter yung social distancing kasi dapat di daw siya airborne. So kung nag-ubo ka daw hanggang 2 meters away. Ganun. But now we have evidence na airborne siya. So what does airborne mean? Sometimes it may be dust or it may be droplet nuclei. So droplet nuclei of course less than this measurement. So sometimes please do take note ng mga ganito. Diba? Baka lang naman siya lumabas. So when does an agent become airborne? Ano yung characteristic niya? So please do remember this. In herd immunity, you're very familiar with this one. We need to at least have 70 to 75 or sometimes higher percentage of immunity to protect the population. So do remember with this one, a technique in rabies is we do ring vaccination wherein pag may nag-positive sa isang lugar, we try to vaccinate all the dogs surrounding the place kung saan yung nag-positive to limit the spread of the rabies virus. So, herd immunity. So first, first major topic, I think. I think meron naman ito doon sa video lecture, so maybe hindi na natin siya kailangan go into deeper. But then again, sa measures of health naman, we're just these are just techniques on how to quantify the distribution of. So primarily, we are trying to identify which proportion, which rate, or which ratio yung gagamitin to measure specific um things based on the objective of your study or based on the objective ng ano gusto mong gawin. Basically, yung proportion, I just need to like, gusto ko lang sa i-clear sa inyo, ratio, rate, and proportion. The proportion, an example of that is the prevalence, wherein the numerator is included sa denominator. So basically, di ba, prevalence, ang formula is number of cases over number of people susceptible or at least risk. So, yung numerator part ng denominator sila sa proportion. Si ratio naman, yung numerator at denominator does not belong to each other. So, ang example niyan is yung ratio ng lalaki sa babae. Hindi naman pwede combine. Pero, if you are to do analysis based on sex, then it's going to be different. Rate naman, when you say rate, it's going to infer something with time. At least in epidemiology, when you say rate, it's gonna be something na i-describe niya kung gaano kabilis ang pag develop ng sakit or a spread ng sakit. So, please remember the difference between the things. So, prevalence is not a rate, it's a proportion. So be careful lang with these newer terms. Anyways, morbidity is sickness. I think you know this already. In measuring morbidity, we primarily use prevalence and incidence. Incidence lang, just a precaution, perhaps. You have to make sure that incidence, diba, kinakount natin sa numerator is new cases compared to prevalence na whether old or new, count natin siya. The incidence is the new cases. So how do you determine that something is new or someone or the animal that has sickness is a new case? So you have to determine na healthy ba siya prior or at least alam natin na bago lang sila nagkasakit. So you have to at least observe that from healthy na nagkasakit. It's going to include it in counting incidents. So yung incidents na alam natin, yung sinasabi kong formula is number of new cases and over number of individual at risk. Basically, ang other term nila is cumulative incidence and incidence risk. So, don't worry, hindi ko kayo papakalculate ito. But the thing here is, of course, it will give you the percentage ng number of new cases over the total population. So, in essence, ganun yun siya. But another thing that you need to at least know or take note of is here incidence is a quantification of risk. So what I mean, it gives you the probability of everyone in the population developing the disease. So for example, may incidence risk kayo or incidence na 50% sa COVID-19, halimbawa sa inyong barangay, may incidence na 50% ng COVID-19. So meaning, every single one of you in the barangay will have a probability of 50% of developing the disease. So, it's a quantification of risk. So, the probability, para sa estimate ng probability of going to be sick. Yun yung incident. Attack rate, basically, it's synonymous to yung incident. But take note, sa secondary attack rate, ibang usapan yan siya. Sa secondary attack rate, ang numerator niya is number of new cases that were in contact with the primary case over the total population of risk. So, new cases, but due to the primary cases. So, I hope you can differentiate the two. Incidence rate, this is just, um, take note lang, the numerator is still the same, number of new cases, but the denominator is amount of at-risk experience or total amount of time that the population was at risk. So, basically, pag dinivide mo ito siya, ang makukuha mo is, may element ka ng number of cases per unit time. So, for example, may 50% ka na incidents. So, ganun yung result. Then, ang total observation time mo is 1 week. So, for example, you can say that the new case, 50 cases will develop for 1 week, per week of observation. So, ayun lang yun siya. It provides an information on how quick or how fast the disease is occurring. So, incidence rate. So, iba ang incidence rate sa cumulative incidence or sa incidence na alam natin. Prevalence, as I previously mentioned, number of total cases, old and new, over population. I think you know this already. Very, very, very common. But what's new, I think what I will give you that's new is the interpretation of prevalence. So you take note na similar doon sa incidence kanina, wherein it is an estimation of risk. The prevalence naman is still an estimation of risk, but instead of the probability of developing disease, it's the probability of already having the disease. So for example, again, in your barangay, may 50% prevalence ng COVID-19. So you could say, or you can interpret that result to mean that every single one of you in your barangay probably already have COVID with 50-50%. I hope you can understand what I mean. Incidence is a estimate of the probability of you, every single one of you, alun ka sa population, developing the disease. The prevalence is the estimate of the probability of you, every single one of you in the population, already having the, because you are already counting old and new. So I hope you can understand those. So there are two types of prevalence. You have your point and period prevalence. So point prevalence, of course, you gather samples basically at one period, one point in time. So for example, nag-gather ka ng analytical samples from lahat ng clinic sa Davao, then you test it for parvo, then that's point prevalence. The percentage that you will get is point prevalence. But if you gather clinical samples from all the clinics in Davao for let's say 2 years or 2 weeks, then that's a period prevalence. I think it's pretty obvious the difference between the two. So there are factors that would yung relationship ng incidence at saka ng prevalence. Basically, hindi ko na to siya isa-isahin, but the point is, pag tumataas ang incidence, tataas din ang prevalence. Because take note, you're counting new cases sa incidence. So, dadagdag yun, yung idadagdag mo sa incidence, dadagdag din yun sa numerator ng prevalence. So, higher the incidence, the higher the prevalence, and vice versa. Yun yung pinaka-common na relationship nila. And do remember this one. Pag gumaling, siyempre, hindi mo na siya i-count na may sakit. So, bababa yung numerator ng prevalence. So, bababa yung prevalence. So, pag mataas ng case fatality, nagkasakit, halimbawa rabies, nagkasakit, patay agad. So, you will not count it as case. So, you will remove it from the numerator. So, bababa din yung prevalence. So, I think those three are what you need to at least remember with regards to the relationship ng incidence at ng prevalence. So, I hope we're clear. Mortality risk basically is mortality. Number of death over population. Mortality rate, same. Yung sa incidence rate kanina, more measures of mortality are similar to incidence because you only die once. Wala namang old in new death. So, when you try to think of it, when you measure mortality, incidence lang din yan siya, pero patay ang bilis lang. We have all of these type of mga measures of mortality. I think the most important are these two, the case fatality at saka proportional mortality. Case fatality is of course number of deaths due to a certain disease over the number of sick individuals. So, kung mataas ang case fatality rate, probably magkasakit pa tayo agad. Yan yung proportional mortality is what the percentage of the death due to a specific cause over the total number of deaths in the population. So, ano lang siya? Anong percentage ng mga nangamatay ang due to ASF? Anong percentage ng total mortality ang due to cancer, due to whatever cause of. So, yun lang yun siya. So, are we clear with measures of health? Hello, hindi everyone are still there. Sino ba andito?
Yes, Doc, clear po.
Sure ba? Pag sure. So, we have Arlene and Miss Case, Green, Miss Manzano, Brill, yeah, Miss Fernandez, and Mr. Kayo. Anyways, welcome everyone. Just listen kung may ginagawa mo kayo, G lang. If kung kumakain ka ng dinner, G lang din. So just try to listen or at least try to learn something. Measures of association, ito na yung nasa analytical concept. Kanina, descriptive versus analytical epidemiology, nasa analytical na tayo. We're now trying to answer the hows and the why of epidemiology. So, previously mentioned kanina, risk is a probability of something occurring. So, basically incidence. If you want to quantify risk, it's incidence. Yun ang pinag-uusapan natin. Yung risk factor is of course a factor or a characteristic ng environment, characteristic ng individual, characteristic ng disease that increase the likelihood of risk. So, if it's a risk factor, tumataas yung likelihood ng occurrence ng disease or ng health phenomenon na gusto mong pag-evaluate. Example, very common. We know this that lung cancer is one of the most widely known risk factor is smoking. So smoking may perhaps cause lung cancer. So how does smoking cause lung cancer? Yun yung try natin pag-uusapan within this topic. So I hope you can still remember. I know sino ko ang taga-cancer ulan nito. You can still remember your 2x2 table. The column, right? The column is the disease ng disease, so positive, negative. Then you have your exposure on the rows. So exposed and exposed. Then you have your AC, AB, CD, and so on. So if you know how to do this, you can calculate all of this. Incidence with incidence lang siya. So yeah, I think I do not need to go through this isa. But the point here is there's a big difference between incidence at saka odds, or at least risk compared to odds. The risk is basically incidence. So cases over the population or the exposed group, in this case, exposed group population, and the number of cases divided by the exposed group population or president exposed. So that's still the same. But with regards to odds, iba na yun siya. Nagiging A over B. So what's the ratio between disease and non-disease among the exposed? So that's a completely different measure when you compare it to incidence or the risk. Just take note of it. So sa measures of association, usually we categorize it into three measures of strength, your RR and OR, RR and OR. Then you have your measures of effect in exposed and measures of effect in the population. So usually what we will focus on this afternoon is more on the measures of strength. Kasi sometimes yun naman yung pinaka-common talaga. Itong dalawa, sometimes sa mga hardcore epidemiological analysis ko lang ito nakikita. So first you have your risk ratio, incidence risk ratio or relative risk or RR for short. So basically, it's just the ratio of risk in exposed over the risk in unexposed. It provides you the likelihood, the difference between the likelihood ng disease occurrence among the exposed over the non-exposed. So the thing here is you need to remember na if mataas yung RA, yung nasa exposed, then probably yung factor na tinitignan mo is associated with the disease. So interpretation, pag yung RR mo more than 1, so meaning mataas talaga, mas mataas yung numerator compared sa denominator, meaning increased risk of outcome. That is due to your exposure or yung factor na tinitignan mo. So age, sex, location, whatever. Then, pag equal siya, meaning equal to 1, meaning equal yung risk sa exposed sa kanang exposed, meaning walang risk or walang effect yung factor na tinitignan mo. Kasi nga, the number of, at least the probability of disease sa exposure sa kanang exposed, equal lang. Ba't mo pa siya i-count as risk factor? Kaya no risk pag 1. Pag less than 1 naman, it would be protective or reduces the risk of the outcome. Meaning, whatever is the exposure na nilagay mo dito sa RE, it protects, it resulted in lesser incidence of disease sa exposed group compared sa control group or doon sa group na walang non-exposed group sa RO. So meaning sometimes, for example, sa mga clinical trials, ang exposure is halimbawa vaccine or a new treatment, usually yun yung, that's what they're after. Ang relative risk is less than 1. Para to make sure na yung exposure or yung drug or yung vaccine, less than the number of disease here is less compared sa mga walang treatment, walang vaccine. So I hope you get what is RR. It's just a ratio. So sometimes it is 0 to infinity actually. But the point here is, pag equals to 1, no risk. Pag more than 1, increases the risk. Pag less than 1, reduces the risk. Ang risk, the reduction or the increase in risk is probably due to the factor na tinitignan mo. Depende sa exposure na ginagamit. Yung E, ano yung E sa RE? Incidence rate ratio, yung rate pa din. Rate lang, basically, it's the same. In essence, pareho lang yan siya. But here, it's the speed at which you are talking about the speed at which new cases are developing. So, syempre, pag mataas yung rate sa yung exposure sometimes is going to increase the rate of the outcome. So, basically, the same as doon sa incidence kanina. Incidence rate kanina. Ratio lang. Now, more commonly, we use OR or the odds ratio. So again, this is supposedly A over AB over C over CB. So ABBC. If gusto mo mano-mano. But the thing here is, yung odds is an incidence, is an estimate of risk ratio. Sometimes, mas madali siyang i-calculate. So yun yung ginagamit ng mga papers. But still, the interpretation is the same. Pag mataas yung odds sa exposed. So meaning, yung factor na tinitignan mo resulted in an increased number of cases, increased number of outcomes. Sometimes yung outcomes disease, for example. Sorry. If less than 1 naman siya, it reduced it. So similar doon sa case kanina, sa clinical trial na yung sinabi ko, ang gusto nila is this one. Ang gusto nilang result is this one. Pero pag ikaw, you want to look for factors, ang gusto mo answer is this one. More than one. So I do hope you understand the difference between relative risk at saka odds ratio. Sometimes, the thing here is since mostly commonly used ito sa mga prevalence studies, case control studies, wherein hindi mo na take note yung prevalence natin, we are counting old in new cases. So, hindi natin nakikita yung ating subject from healthy to sick. Basta binilang lang natin kung ilan yung may sakit. So, we don't quantify risk in that manner. Wala tayong incidents na binibilang kasi old and new cases bibilangin natin. So in that particular scenario, mas magandang gamitin ang odds ratio kasi walang risk. So yun In studies na walang risk na nangyayari, hindi mo nakikita na from healthy to sick, odds ratio yung gagamitin. So basically, it's still a measure of probability. But ang odds ratio more than 1, the factor is a risk factor. Ang odds ratio less than 1, it is a protective factor. If the odds ratio is 1, then equal lang yung odds of disease exposed sa na risk po. So, do not bother analyzing that factor. Adjusted effect, attributable risk. If you want to study it, you may be able to study it, but yeah, I doubt na lalabas ito. Somewhat very deep epidemiology already. Population is just the same. It's just these two, itong population attributable risk, just the same as the attributable fraction attributable risk sa population nga lang. If you want to go deeper into this, think andun yan sa handout if you must. So again, the most important the most important measures of health that you need to at least familiarize yourself with is the risk ratio or RR at saka yung OR. Kasi previously mentioned, mostly case control, i-review natin itong mga types of studies later on. But the point here is pag sinabing case control, this is already started and this is already developed. So, hindi siya incident in a sense na maghihintay ka na mag-develop yung disease. So, odds yung gagamitin natin. But if there is a possibility that you will witness subjects developing disease so from healthy to sick, such is the case sa cohort, then you may want to use risk ratio. So, anytime that risk could be measured, use risk ratio. In other cases, such as in prevalence studies or case control studies, use odds ratio. So, I doubt naman na I doubt naman na magpa-calculate sila sa inyo. But just remember what those means, what RR and OR means, when do we use it, and how do we interpret the so, baka ganun lang naman yung lalabas. Then association, ito pala, just because you get a relative risk or odds ratio of, let's say, more than 1, and yung p-value niya is less than 0.05, that does not necessarily mean na yung factor na tinitignan mo the cause of the disease or at least associated with the disease. Associated probably, but is it the cause? Not necessarily. So a cause, yung movement from risk factor to cause is sometimes it's a very weird or a very lengthy process. But in a sense, um, madali lang naman siya. But it's very strenuous to prove that something is a cause of a particular disease. So, I think alam niyo ba kung anong meaning ng cause? So, it involves a lot of studies. So, all of this, if you want to be a scientist or something like a researcher, you may go through this. Napakahirap. But anyways, let's go through, please let's mention the important details with regards to causation. Because hindi naman lahat ng causes, hindi porket, ay nasabi ko, hindi porket mataas yung odds ratio or relative risk niya, at saka yung p-value na less than 0.05, does not necessarily mean na siya yung cause ng sakit, o siya yung cause ng epidemic, o siya yung cause ng outbreak. So, you can actually break down the types of causes into three. You have your component causes, official causes, and necessary causes. Component causes, these are just like pieces of a pie, as we see here in this example. So they may not necessarily be the most important causes, but they are contributing factors. So kung mga contributing causes natin. So, for example, yeah, high cholesterol, smoking, lack of exercise, these are just like a lot of contributing factors to actually many diseases in human medicine. Or for example, pwede natin gawin siya na in animal environment could be poor practices, not vaccinating the animals, could be like that. Basically, they are just component causes that when you bring them together, they may cause the disease. Sufficient causes naman are the set of conditions without any one of which disease would have would have occurred. So basically, pag each of the component causes, pag binuo mo na siya, it will like this, binuo mo na siya into 1/5, that's the sufficient cause. So as the name implies, yung pagsama-sama ng different component causes is enough to cause the disease. So that's the sufficient cause. Necessary cause naman, for example, this is very common, madaling mag-identify ng necessary cause sa infectious disease because the agent is the necessary cause. Walang rabies kung walang rabies virus. Walang salmonella kung walang salmonella bacteria. Right? So, necessary cause, it is necessary. Dapat andun talaga siya to cause the disease. So, sometimes, there are diseases na yung necessary cause, sufficient na siya to cause the disease. Such as, rabies, papasahan ka lang ng rabies, pag nasa katawan mo na yung rabies, probably, pag umabot na sa utak, then you have rabies, for example. But there are also cases na andun yung necessary cause, but it doesn't cause the disease. For example, in your skin right now, or at least in your body, there are a lot of E. coli bacteria. But you do not suffer currently with cholelacillosis because the presence of the necessary cause is not sufficient to cause the. So here in this example, the necessary cause is A because it needs to be present to cause the disease. But its presence alone is not sufficient to cause the disease. That's why it needs different component causes as you see here. So as an example, again, previously mentioned, just because your chicken has E. coli does not necessarily mean na siya E. coli. Mag-develop siya og infestation o coli bacillosis because especially sa chicks at saka sa mga piglets, high stress, malnutrition, improper practices has to be present at least inflict stressful at a stressful environment para mag-succumb yung animal sa coli bacillosis. So, for this example, ito yung example na may necessary cause, but the necessary cause alone is not sufficient to cause the disease. So, madaming mga component causes. Madami pa aside from. Meanwhile, we also have equine laminitis wherein walang necessary cause. At least wala siya in the sense na ang dami niyang possible causes. Walang isang causes na dapat andun. Laminitis could be due to critical factors, metabolic diseases, inflammatory processes, and many more. So, these are component causes, but when you put them together, they may be sufficient. So, this is an example of a disease, metabolic disease, or metabolic, a disease in animal na walang necessary cause. Walang isang cause na kailangan. Next, you have rabies. So, of course, the necessary cause is the rabies virus, of course. But the rabies virus being present in the environment doesn't necessarily mean na yung mga tao magkaka-rabies. Right? So, for example, in the Philippines, almost 99% of our rabies cases are due to animal bites or dog bites. Right? So, dog bite, pag ginagat ka ba ng animal, does that necessarily mean na magkaka-rabies ka? No, right? Because the dog has to be rabied itself para mapasa niya yung virus sa'yo. So, yes, the necessary cause is rabies virus, the rabies virus, but the component cause being that the dog has to bite you. Pag sinasama mo yun siya, rabid dog, kinagat ka, that is the sufficient cause for transmission of rabies. But you have to remember that what component cause, what's sufficient cause, and what's a necessary cause may be different geographically because there are countries where in our areas in the globe wherein yung causes ng number one cause ng rabies nila is not actually dog bite but rather mga bats. There was an incident of mga mountaineers ago in one area in the US, I think. They went to a cave, then they acquired rabies due to the airborne transmission mula sa mga laway ng mga bats hanging from the ceiling ng cage. So, hindi naman sila kinagat ng aso, but they had rabies. So, what's necessary, what components, and what's sufficient may change different, may change depends on time, may change on, depending on the geographic location. So, I hope you understand the difference between the three types of causes. Then, primarily, there are criteria. We call this criteria, epidemiological criteria, to determine if a factor is a cause. So, they basically determine causation. I'm sure you're very familiar with the Koch postulate, itong apat na ito. And I know you know na hindi naman siya applicable in all cases. You cannot identify the cause of diabetes with this one kasi hindi mo naman ako culture yung cause of diabetes. So, yeah. Evans rule, basically these eight are somewhat similar sa Bradford Hill, which is this eight also. So, you may want to read this eight, but let's focus on Bradford Hill criteria. So, number one, strength of association. So, you sometimes, um, what do you mean? Strength of association. So, dapat yung odds ratio, relative risk, or whatever measure na ginagamit nila, dapat malakas talaga siya. If the odds ratio is consistently 1 lang, then it's not, it may be, it has a weak association. So, that's a strong association. And consistency, dapat, kung associated, yung risk factors associated sa disease, then dapat sa lahat ng studies, nakikita natin siya as risk factors. That's consistency. Temporality, um, exposure comes before outcome. Hindi naman pwede na nag-outcome ka, tapos doon pa nangyari yung rason kung bakit ka nagkasakit. So, exposure has to precede the outcome. Close response relationship, higher exposure, higher outcome. Plausibility and coherence, possible ba siya based on scientific knowledge na ganun yung exposure mo is a cause of the outcome. Experimental evidence, laboratory evidence, ganun lang yun siya. Specificity, one exposure leads to one outcome. Is it one is to one? Analogy, are there other diseases na similar yung nangyari? Similar na risk factor din siya in other diseases or in similar diseases. So, yun lang yun siya. Basically, this eight is the shorthand version of this is this. So, there's a relationship between them. Basically, the thing is, the point is, we have different criteria na kailangan ma-fulfill before we conclude na a risk factor or something is the cause of something. Get what I mean? Just because you isolated a bacteria or a sick dog, for example, or you identified a specific pathogen in a sick animal, doesn't necessarily mean na yun yung cause ng disease unless proven talaga siya na yun yung cause. So, that's what I'm trying to say. So you have four considerations lang. With regards to causation, you have four considerations. Random variation, lahat naman tayo iba-iba. But if lahat tayo iba-iba, if lahat naman tayo susceptible sa COVID, so COVID really is, um, the sufficient cause of COVID is somewhat true. Intrinsic non-causal relationship, so just because may gabi, doesn't necessarily mean na yung reason kung bakit may umaga ay gabi. Just because you have a right hand, doesn't necessarily mean na yun yung reason kung bakit may left hand ka. Ganun. Bias is errors in the study or the errors in analysis. Then, causal criteria. Now, another factor lang gusto kong i-highlight tayo is confounding. Si confounding, madaling sabi, mga panggulo. So, an example of this is the confounding relationship here is the fan ventilation and respiratory disease. So, what's happening here? So, they found that herd size may cause respiratory disease. So, of course, pag mataas yung herd size, herd density sa isang housing unit, meaning pag may nagkasakit na isa, pasa-pasa na. So, the relationship is there. And you also know na pag mataas yung herd size, inevitably, pag gusto mo siya i-house in a single lot, you may want to use mga tunnel ventilation, right? Yung mga naka-OJT sa mga malalaking farms, I think you will know, you at least you have an idea of this one, yung tunnel vent. But what's funny is when you try to calculate, perhaps calculate yung RR or yung OR, makikita niyo na mataas yung OR na relationship ng fan ventilation sa respiratory disease. It does not necessarily mean na pag may fan ventilation ka, tataas din yung rate or at least yung incidence ng respiratory disease sa farm mo. Not quite, right? Not necessarily, right? So that's the Fourier association or the confounding relationship. So meaning, it is a confounder if pag may tinanggal, diba, tatlong ito sa, let's say, lab triangle na ito, pag may tinanggal ka, saka yung genuine association na tanggal, that's a confounder. If tinanggal mo siya, then may association pa din sila, then that's the effect modifier. But the point here is, yung confounders, sometimes panggulo talaga sila. Just because you see na mataas yung RR at OR, you need to double check if um plausible talaga yung relationship. Because it doesn't make sense na pag hindi porket may fan ventilation, yun na yung cause or yun na yung rason kung bakit kumakalat yung respiratory disease. Probably, you need to factor in third side. So, I hope you understand what confounders are. But generally, panggulo talaga sila. Yun lang for short term, yung confounders, panggulo ng anal, which is natural sometimes. And we have methods naman to reduce the effect of confounders if you really need to. So, I think we're done with this. So, we will have at least a break if you are okay. Okay pa ba kayo? More pa tips? Hello? Ikaw pa mo? Are you still there?
Yes,
Hello?
Doc.
So, break sa takandali. Not necessarily 5 minutes. Kasi lang. Break. Then, we'll go back. Let's record. Diretso lang yung recording. Hello. I'm back. Hindi ko na construct skills kaya katugay kong pro. Anyway, kamusta na mo? For people, sino mo ang dito? No, Daniel, okay. So, sanang smoking. Ano ko? So, October. Nag-start na inyong ano? May I ask, nag-start na inyong review? Like yung review center yan, for your exam? Hello?
Wala. Wala pa din.
Ano wala pang nag-open ng review center for September, October.
Ano to, Doc?
Wala pang review center na nag-open for the September, October exam.
Meron na, Doc. Nag-offer na po ang recency at top rank.
Pero wala pa nag-official start. Offer pa lang.
Yes. So, I think.
Wala pa naman. April, May pa yun. Anyway, that's but yan, nag-start na mag-review. Star. Nag-start na mag-review.
Continuous na gyapon, Doc, atong mga nabili.
Yeah, that's fine. At least you're starting. Unti-unti lang. Medyo, at least from now, meron pa you still have time. konti-konti lang. But yeah, so I think we'll not finish the 5 minute break kasi ano na lang, sa magic na lang siya ng 5 minutes. So we'll continue with study design. So ito na yung mga pinasasabi kong cross-sectional cohort saka case control kanina. So in essence, in the study of veterinary delivery or veterinary science in general, we are actually divided, the study is divided, the research is divided into three. You have the descriptive study, analytical, at saka experimental. So as the name implies, descriptive, nag-describe lang yun siya. No comparison group, no hypothesis testing, but you can develop hypothesis sa descriptive. So halimbawa, nakita niyo mo nga common ang leptospirosis sa male nga dog, for example. So pwede mo siyang isulat sa isang paper ng hypothesis na baka male, there's something with male sex sa dog, for example. But you describe kung ano yung nakita mo. Basically, just description. Analytical in a sense na, ito na, similar to analytical epidemiology, we try to answer how and why. So, may comparison group, pwedeng may intervention, pwedeng wala. Experimental, could be laboratory based, or could be random control trials. So, may intervention dito, may intervention talaga. So, in essence, then this is how it looks like. Pag walang comparison group, walang hypothesis formation, descriptive lang yan siya. Case report, we'll go through this one by one, kung anong mga ito. Then hypothesis, if you are going to test the hypothesis or yun na, mag-analyze ka, you will start into calculating mga relative risk, odds ratio, etc. At saka may comparison group ka na, for example, exposed versus unexposed. You are talking about analytical, epidemiology analytical study. So if no intervention, observational, you have the cohort, case control, and case sectional, cross-sectional, psychological. And if my intervention, you may want to view it, it may be na experimental, could be laboratory-based experiments, yung mga nagtitesis ng yung mga extract versus parasitic diseases. So you could belong here. Or randomized control trials, mga field study. Yung pag sinabing quasi-experimental, walang randomization ng grouping. So, yung grupo lang based on banta-banta. So first, we'll go on to your observational studies or descriptive studies. So, case report, halimbawa, I hope you have read some case reports in your time. Basically, yung case report lang naman, some newsworthy clinical occurrence. So, for example, you encountered a case of a new disease, or you use a novel drug, or naggamit kayo ng pinakuluang ano bang dahon, papaya, halimbawa dahon ng papaya, naging gamot, you saw that it was clinically proven, or at least you proved it in one of your patients for effective siya for parvo, halimbawa. You want to report it based on the case na yung case ng patient, yung sa case report. Basically, you're talking about one, kumbaga yung pinag-aral mo isa lang. So you just want to note na, okay, we found something new, or may bagong vision ka na nakita na unreported, so you may want to use it, case reports to study it. Case series being that, case reports na madami. So madami kang animal or madami kang cases na tinitingnan. Case studies, an example of this is yung thesis ni Royce or yung other mga thesis, yung mga cross lessons ng mga thesis na basically more on percentages. You want to present ano yung mga reasons from what animal, from what organ, what part of the body. More on percentages. Supposedly analytical itong kay Lois, but I removed the p-value kasi hindi naman importante. But yeah, the point is, you need to describe what are the lesions or what is the disease specific population and mga basically describe that. Now let's go to analytical observational study. First is your cohort study. So what you need to realize with cohort that pag cohort study siya, you divide the population based on exposure. So exposed versus non-exposed. And you have these outcomes here. You can remember, you can plug in this sa inyong 2 by 2 tables na yung kanina sa measure of situation. So, you need to realize that sometimes yung cohort study is prospective, meaning you start at the very beginning. You identify subjects, then you classify them based on exposure status. Then you get the outcome. Could be disease or non-disease. But pwede rin naman sa retrospective, meaning you start here, then you try to group them, then calculate. But the point is, the cohort study, the grouping is, or the classification is based on exposure status. So what do we use usually in cohort study? If it is prospective, or at least we see here that yung exposure comes before the outcome, so it's an incidence. You can calculate incidence or quantify the risk. So mostly we use risk ratio for this particular example. The thing with cohort studies is that maganda yung association niya because yung association na makukuha mo is good because you see that it is developed. Kasi yung grouping mo is based on exposure at saka non-exposed. The problem is maghihintay ka ng outcome. So what if yung outcome mo is cancer, which is very long ang incubation period. So maghihintay ka ng matagal. So, it's not usually feasible for studies that yung exposure is rare, saka yung outcome has very high incubation period. Yun yung disadvantages mo. Saka mahal siya. This control study, this is retrospective in nature. Why? Because you start at the very beginning, you start with people who are already sick, are your cases. Yung division dito, or yung grouping mo is based on disease and non-disease. So again, recap, cohort study, ang grouping mo is based on exposure. Exposed versus unexposed. Sa case control, the name implies, cases versus control. So cases are sick people versus non-sick people or animals. So in this particular scenario, the disease already occurred. Hindi mo nakikita na disease develop compared sa prospective cohort. But here, if plug mo itong sagot, plug mo itong outcome sa 2 by 2 table, ito ang itsura niya. Take note, wala kang idea on how the disease develop, kung sino yung mga walang sakit from the start. So, in calculating this, you only use the feasible option to use odds ratio. Pag case control, odds ratio lang talaga siya. No other method. Hindi pwede ang risk ratio, hindi pwede ang prevalence ratio. Odds ratio lang talaga. Kasi, wala nang risk. So, since you start with people who are already sick, wala nang risk na makita. Hindi ka na makakalculate ng incident. Yun yung point. Cross-sectional study, prevalence studies are the best example of this one. So, as you can see here, sample ka for 1 week, for example, for parvo. So, you gather information and exposure. So, of course, yung disease outcome, in particular, 1 week lang din. So, cross-section. So, basically, para ka lang nag-picture ng disease scenario on that week. And sa pag-gather mo ng information that week, you will get this information which you can plug sa 2 by 2 table. Calculation, most of the time, this is prevalent. But also, for the calculation, association of risk, or association analysis, pwede ka mag-PR or physically relative risk using prevalence data. But most commonly, we use odds ratio for cross-sectional studies. Ecological studies, these are quite good. Kasi the level, yung mga previous studies na discuss ko, yung level of analysis, individual animal or individual group or individual animal. Sa ecological studies, this is by group. The data is for barangay, the data is for region, the data is for city. This is quite easy because number of data, so mga data na ito, you can gather it from PSA and other authorities. The problem is you have ecological fallacy wherein may association ka na nakita sa group data pero pag baba mo na analyze individual level, it doesn't fit. So, ganun yun. Like, sometimes there are difference between association sa group data versus individual data. So, yun yung ecological fallacy. Kailangan mo bantayan if you are doing ecological studies. RCTs, in essence, actually, RCTs could be pa-pattern out mo siya sa cohort study wherein yung exposure mo is the treatment. Then, again, you use RR or OR. But mostly RR is suitable. So this one, kindly, if you are, andun naman ito sa notes, I think, kindly take note lang ng mga ganito, what the specific characteristics of this study design, saka kung ano yung mga analysis type of analysis that could be done using these different study types. So, sometimes, lumalabas ito, sometimes what type of study design, baka may question applied, anong study design ang gagamitin mo for this particular scenario, or magbibigay sa ng definition ng study design, saka you identify what type of study design it is. So, do take note of this, at least this thing, including yung RCT. Then, take note lang din ito, you will be veterinarian, or you will be practicing veterinarian soon. So, take note of this hierarchy of scientific evidence. So, do take note na the highest two are the meta-analysis at saka systematic review. Meta-analysis is, halimbawa, madaming study, sinumbay nila yung data, then i-analyze nila ulit. Yun yung meta-analysis. Systematic review, a review, para ka nagsulat ng RRL, pero may methodology. You know what I mean? Pag nasulat tayo ng RRL, pag pinasulat mo kayo ng RRL during your thesis, sulat na kayo ng sulat. Kung ano makita nyo sa Google Scholar, yun yung siya. But in systematic review, may methodology. May specific talaga siya na methodology. Para kung ano yung kita mo na outcome, very specific also to the objective ng research. So, may methodology siya. Hindi lang siya basta review. So, take note, of course, including RCT. Ito yung, of course, randomized trial, one of the most important, especially pag you are testing the efficacy of something, of a new intervention, vaccine or drug. So, these two are the highest. So, do take note na baka may makita kayo ng mga papers sa US Scholar reporting something na nasa level ng animal trial or laboratory research at saka case control, case report, I mean. Be careful in applying it with your practice. Okay? They are on the lower or the weakest level of scientific evidence. Just because effective yung dahon-dahon ng 3 goals or 4 goals doesn't necessarily mean it will be effective in when you apply it in a population. So just be wary of. So I hope you understand this. Then pataas na yung study. Different study types na minention. Sampling. Very last. If you notice, nasa applied epidemiology na tayo, more on the application side of the epidemiology, then I think those who have the study on mga prevalence studies or other types of studies similar to that, makarelate or at least makarelate ka sa mga ito. So, sampling, hindi naman necessary na when you want to determine the prevalence of certain disease, hindi naman necessary na i-test mo lahat ng animal sa population. Gusto mo malaman yung prevalence ng tae sa North Cotabato, kung may budget ka, test mo lahat ng kambing. If not, you really have to sample some that is You really have to get a sample that is representative of the total population. Yun yung main point ng sampling. Target population, in the sense, ito yung population mo, kung yun yung study mo, prevalence ng CAE sa North Cotabato, yung lahat ng kambing sa North Cotabato, yun yung target population. Yung na-sample mo from out of that, based on calculation or based on ano man yung criteria mo for sampling, yun na yung study population mo. With every single one of those is a sampling unit or a sample. So I hope you know all of these terms. Now, a problem with sampling is that you have, again, representativeness is the main key here, wherein dapat yung study population mo representative sa target population. At kung ano bang makita mo sa analysis mo sa sample, dapat it reflects the target population. Kung 50% ng prevalence na nakita mo sa sample, if your sampling study population is representative of the target population, then we can say na baka malapit sa 50% din ang prevalence ng sakit sa total population. So that's what we see. Internal validity, tama ba yung kuha mong result in your study group or your study population? Is that correct? In your study sample, tama ba yung percentage na positive? Tama ba yung test mo na ginamit? Or whatever. External validity, yung nakita mo ba sa sample mo or sa study population mo, is that valid to be put into consideration sa total population? So, you have to consider all of this. So, sampling, probability sampling, non-probability sampling. Pag may random sampling, probability. Pag non-random, non-probability. Alam niyo naman siguro ito, most of you may have used sampling purposive or convenient sampling, perhaps. So, mga non-probability yan sila. Probability sampling, simple random, alam niyo naman yun siya. Systematic sampling, may number kayo. Stratified sampling, stratification, pwede nyo i-divide, stratify sa sex, this number sa female, this number sa male. Cluster, pag-group, pwede na per barangay, per farm, per whatever. Then, group and individual, multi-stage. So, i-random, mag-randomly select ka ng barangay, within that barangay, mag-randomly select ka ng ano yung. So, may random sampling, that's probability sampling. Next, we have your diagnostic test. So, kaya na ba? This is, I think, pangalawang 2x2 table that you will learn or at least will review this evening. Um, when we talk about assessing how good tests are, we usually are talking about specificity, positive predictive value, negative predictive value. So, this evening, yun lang naman, yung apat lang yun yung pag-discuss natin. We'll not go deep into the likelihood ratio and other measures, like mga kappa-analysis. So, hindi tayo pupunta doon. Anyways, usually when you want to test a new test or test how good a new test is, you compare it with a gold standard. The gold standard being that the best, basically the best that we have for now. So sometimes, in most cases, pag infectious disease, mga PCR test would be the gold standard. Parasitology would be yung egg, pag makita mo yung egg, yun siya. So basically, it's the best that we have. So if the 2x2 table mo siya, your column will basically be the gold standard result. So positive, negative sa gold standard. Your row is positive, negative ng unit test. So of course, pag andito, pag A, let's say A, B, C, D, yung nasa A, it's gonna be the true positive at saka nasa D, the true negative. Now, when we talk about sensitivity, it's the true positive rate. So basically, a true positive rate, basically, basically the A over AC. So the thing here is when you talk about sensitivity, gaano ba siya katama yung test, gaano katama yung mga sagot niya compared sa gold standard. So how accurate is it when you compare it to the results of the gold standard? On the opposite side, specificity, gaano katama yung na-identify niya as negative compared sa gold standard, which is your true negative rate. Yeah, true negative rate is your specificity. So usually we would prefer a test with a sensitivity specificity of upward more than 95%. At least because when we say, I do hope na still remember your sensitivity specificity because this is quite important because it tells how good the new test is compared to the gold standard. Kasi when we say that, for example, we have a test sensitivity and specificity is 90%, for example. So if we test 10 positive animals, the test will be able to identify 9 out of 10. So may isang true, may isang false, negative. Now, if we put that into a population of 100 positive tests, 100 positive na people, i-test mo doon sa test, merong 10 na positive na bibigyan nila ng negative result. So, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Na sensitivity and specificity is very important when we are trying to test or we're trying to identify kung ano yung mga test na gagamitin natin for your clinic or for your practice in the future. Hindi lang na siya nga porket palapitan mo o palapitan mo og company nga, please use our test because of this benefit. No. Please double check the sensitivity and specificity of the test that you are using. So next, we have your predictive value. Now, sometimes confusing are predictive values when you compare it to sensitivity and specificity. But the point here is sensitivity specificity is how good the test is, yung performance ng test compared sa gold standard. Yung positive predictive value, negative predictive value, or predictive values in general, we are talking about how true is the result. So, pag result yung tinitingnan natin, PPV and NPV, yun yung ina-analyze natin. So, for example, take note that you can see here in this tomato table, pag PPV ang tinitingnan natin is A over AB. So, gaano sa lahat na binigyan ng positive ng test, ilan yung tama? What's the percentage of tama? Yun yung PPV or NPV, kabaliktaran, D over PV. So, it's a percentage ng tamang sagot ng test on its own accord. So, for example, naka-receive ka ng positive result for COVID, but the PPV of the test is 90%, for example, only 90%. So, you can say that the result is somewhat problematic because there's a 10% chance na mali siya. You get what I mean? When we talk about predictive value, we are talking about the result, how correct or how accurate is the result. But when we talk about sensitivity at specificity, we are talking about how good the test is compared to a gold standard. In essence, ganito lang yan siya. If you want to check sensitivity specificity, calculate mo itong patayo. Here and here. Take note, sensitivity is true positive rate. Specificity is go negative rate. But if you want PPV at saka NPV, pahiga. So I hope that makes it easier at least to remember yung formula nilang dalawa. Sensitivity, specificity patayo, NPV, PPV, pahiga. So, pag test result ang tinitignan, predictive value. Pag how good the test is compared to the gold standard, sensitivity and specificity. So I hope that clears up your mind with regards to this, how we assess um diagnostic test. So let's now move on to population surveillance, health surveillance. So surveillance according to the OIE or the WO now, WOAH. Surveillance is a systemic ongoing collection and collation of data. Collation analysis of data is two. And analysis of information related to animal health and the timely dissemination is one of information to those who need to know so that actions can be taken. So basically, it's data collection plus data analysis plus data dissemination so action can be taken. So this is I think the thing that you need to remember with regards to surveillance, dapat may gawin ka. Or at least you do something, you disseminate the information so action can be taken. So take note of that factor. Because you also have monitoring. But in a sense, monitoring is it's basically data gathering and data analysis. So you just check if the prevalence is within common range, or if there are an outbreak of worry. So you don't the goal here is just to check the distribution of seeds, not necessarily to do something. So that's the difference between surveillance and monitoring. If you have to do something, if there is dissemination and action, that is surveillance. Pag data analysis and if data collection, data analysis lang, that is monitoring. So bakit ipa-compare and contrast kayo sa for example. So general purpose of surveillance, you have this. If wala yung sakit sa wala yung sakit sa bansa natin, usually it's just to detect exotic and new emerging diseases. So I think now they are trying to ramp up surveillance on African horse sickness, surveillance on lump skin disease at saka mobile spongiform encephalopathy because there is a new outbreak in Brazil, I think. Then demonstrate freedom from disease. Of course, kailangan natin demonstrate na wala tayong FMD. We are still free from disease. Then if present naman siya, of course, one of the goal is to determine the level of distribution. That is the case na ginagawa natin sa ASF. Every month or every week or so, mayroong yung mapa-mapa ng Philippines. So that's one method of surveillance, one aspect of surveillance. And you also, of course, want to do surveillance to assess the progress of the program. So I do not know what the situation of ASFPI in our region, but I do hope maganda siya. Don't know. I honestly do not know. So there are several common features of surveillance programs. So do take note na walang one format for surveillance sa buong mundo. So it's gonna be different from different diseases for um different reasons, right? Different for different reasons, saka different scenario. So iba-iba yun siya. But the thing is, you need to remember these purposes for surveillance. So outbreak investigation, wait lang to siya. So an outbreak, sometimes it is synonymous with epidemic. So biglang taas yung number of cases. But the thing here is, sometimes yung outbreak, tinidefine din siya as a short-term epidemic. Wherein, within a short period of time, biglang tumaas lang talaga yung number of cases. And of course, the investigation na gagawin is outbreak investigation. So, four major objectives, of course, determine the cause of the outbreak. Ano yung cause ng outbreak? What's the source? Saan siya nanggaling? What's the extent? What's the prevalence? What's the incidence? What's the all these measures? Then determine the best control strategy. So there are 9 basic steps to outbreak investigation. Wait, kung makita. 9 basic steps. So in general, you need to confirm the diagnosis. Ano yung outbreak? Baka outbreak lang yan may outbreak lang due to MAR testing. You need to confirm. Case definition is a criteria kung ano yung bibilangin mo as case. So for example, hindi porket nilagnat, hindi porket nag-ubo, hindi porket nasipaw, COVID-19 agad. So there's a set of definitions na ginagamit to identify a case. Para alam mo kung sino bibilangin, yung point kung bakit may case definition. Confirm the outbreak, again, just confirm, basi salasalaran sila dito sa pro, sa kabalo nga normal na di ay na siya. to confirm the outbreak, collect data, then analyze, basically um, data collection and analysis part, clarify the hypothesis, control measures, prevention, of course, ang bibigay ka ng control preventive measures. Most common one that we employ in the Philippines is the 171 protocol that has been employed to actually it was originally for FMD but ginagamit na ito for other diseases such as AI and AS currently. And continue intensive investigation. Why do you need to continue investigation? Because you need to double check if the control measures that you are implementing is effective or not. Hindi porket nag-implement ka na ng control measures, mauna lang siya. You just wait for it to go away. It's not gonna happen. Then you need to communicate your findings. Dili pwede nga i-leave people out of the blue na wala sa kabalkon silang buhaton. You need to communicate your findings to the authorities. You need to communicate your findings to other personnel and even the community. But at the same time, dili po nimo nga ikaw po ang mag-source o mag-test. Kita ang nai-test at kita ang AI sa inyong barangay. Hindi po pwede nga. So, risk communication. So, going back to your APT, we mentioned this in the first part of the lecture. So, this very specific to veterinary epidemiology, APT, madali yan. Para siyang adenosine triphosphate, source of energy cells. So, animal time in place. But in epidemiology is animal time in place. So, time, yung animal, alam niyo siya, intrinsic at saka extrinsic determinant siya. Time will go back to the epidemic curve. Um, as you can show here, of course, going back, your y-axis is the number of cases, and the x-axis is your time component. So again, we're going back to the propagated at saka common source epidemic. To those of you who came in late, common source in the sense na probably these people who got sick were exposed to the disease or the agent at the same time, at least in the same period of time. Pag kaya siya, isang taas, then baba na. Probably because nagkasakit na lahat or patay na lahat, kaya siya bumababa. But in a sense, if you plot the epidemic curve and makita nyo na wavy siya, somewhat wavy yung pattern, then it may be a propagated epidemic. In the sense that nagkakapasa-basa na siya. So you can see it here. So again, point source epidemic, probably all of the animals who are sick were exposed at the same area, the same point in time. Sharp upward, then sloping downward. So how does that look like in graph, or if we are to put it in a diagram? It looks like this. They may have been exposed within the same area, within the same particular point in time. Nagkasakit silang lahat, probably. And the only difference is that medyo nagkaiba-iba lang ng time of onset of disease because incubation period is a period in a specific time or date. So, sharp increase, then gradual decline. Kasi isang exposure, probably somewhere here, one exposure, then all of them got sick. But if you can see here, if it's propagated, it's gonna be wavy. This. In the sense that nagpasa-pasa na yung sakit. So how does it look like in a diagram? It looks like this. Possibly, siya yung nauna, pinasa niya dito. Possibly, this animal got it from this, then pinasa niya sa iba, the next, and so on, and so forth. That's why, if you plot it, it's gonna look like this. If you are presented with an epidemic curve that looks like this, it's gonna be the possible probability is that what's happening is something like this. So propagated siya nagkakapta silang mga animals ng sakit. So place geographic, we discussed it earlier. You can see here this is the research of I think Dr. Gundran from CLSU, CRRS in Nueva Ecija. There's from different time place nagkakaiba-iba yung pattern ng disease based on geographic location. Yun yung point. Animal intrinsic and extrinsic factors, you know this already. Then of course, we do this, data collect, analyze, then write conclusions, and recommend sa ating mga farmers, recommend sa ating mga local authorities, and so on. And please mga main slides namin noon, just risk communication will not be the source of more testing. Just um, be careful with what you share with whom. Then risk analysis is I think the last part. Yeah, last no, not the last part, but second to the last is your risk analysis. Basically, four parts. You have your hazard and identification, wherein you are identifying the hazard. Ano yung, kumbaga, yung doon sa quotation kanina, ano yung necessary cost? Ano yung kailangan mong bantayan? So, do take note that yung ASF natin, 2018 pa lang, before pa siya pumasok, meron na tayong risk-based plan. So, in-identify na natin siya as a hazard years before it already, before pa siya nag-enter sa Pilipinas. So, hazard, yun yung, in essence, yun yung hazard identification. Next, you have your risk assessment number two. So you assess, risk assessment, you assess what's the probability of it entering the country or it entering the area. What's going to be the effect pag pumasok siya, pag kumalat, ano yung epekto. So basically trying to assess the risk. Next, number three, hopefully, hindi umabot dito, but in a sense, risk management, nandito na siya. You're trying to manage it already. Ano yung mga control programs mo, ano yung mga prevention programs mo, and so on and so forth. Then risk communication, supposedly, paikot lang ito siya. You need to communicate carefully in different audience. Hindi mo naman pwedeng siwalat lahat kasi it may cause paranoia, for example. So those are the four main components of risk analysis. Baka lang lumabas sa exam ninyo. Hazard identification, ano yung hazard, ano yung kailangan natin bantayan. Risk assessment, ina-assess mo yung pagpasok niya, anong mangyayari kung makapasok pa talaga siya sa probability. Risk management, anong gagawin natin pag nandito na siya. Then risk communication, paano natin i-communicate yung results natin. Listen, sino yung first analysis for components. Then, wala na akong, I think I don't have time, I don't need to discuss control and prevention programs, but I do hope ma-download niyo yung lista. I give you the PowerPoint later on. Kindly download this. I think mga 4 pages lang ito. Ito yung title part ng document from WHO, the OIE. And ano siya, short, brief discussion lang on how to control and prevent animal disease. So, I hope you will gain knowledge on this one because this is the trend of epidemiology now. Hindi na lang siya prevalence incidence whatsoever. ORR. We are trying now to apply it. Ang pagturo namin sa mga bata sa inyo, in essence, is from data gathering down to how we control expertise. So I hope you have time to at least like go through it and find some valuable information. So I think that's my time. Ilang hours pa tayo. Around 2 hours din na chikahan. But anyways, do you have any questions? I know very information overload. But yeah, we tried to we tried to bring one semester into a couple of hours. So, do you have any questions? Hello, napanguliha. I still
Nana, sir.
okay.
Okay.
Information overload. I know information overload siya, but yeah. If you have any questions, you can like message me lang do sa group or whatever. Then we'll try to answer. Yeah. So
So,
that's it. So, good evening, everyone. I-upload lang ako ang video sa YouTube. I hope it's good. So, thank you.
thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
sir.